if I didn't do it, would I have done it? Would I still have done it? At that point, my knee was just absolutely giving me aggro, and I was just thinking, God, am I even going to be able to go beyond this week? And their body physically has to adapt or break. And I was stretching out minutes of just worrying about, like, am I going to be able to continue? Left with this barren environment that you still have to cycle through. There's only one direction, and then suddenly I was alone in India. Like, I was attracting a lot of attention, and very rapidly as well, and he wants to get them out of that situation, and the only way he sees fit is to work 12 hours a day in a mine, and he's 13. That's a reality that's happening today. Not all experiences will happen to you. You have to seek them out.
Right, guys, welcome back to the Adventure Athletes podcast. On today's episode, we've got Ed Hack. Ed is a very good friend of mine, and we're going to be speaking about his journey where he cycled from England to Australia and everything that happened along the way. We talk about the human desire to try and be the first to do something, and we speak a lot about privilege and how it affects how you view the world. Two things you'll notice in this episode is there was no Taylor for a start. So Taylor couldn't make the episode, unfortunately. He was having issues with his car, so he couldn't come. And the second one is the new audio setup. So we listened to your feedback. We got a lot of feedback about the inconsistent audio. So we've got an audio recorder and new mics, and we've invested out of pocket to get these. So I really hope you appreciate the effort and money that's gone into it. We're constantly looking for improvement. So let us know your thoughts on the changes we're making to the podcast and any other improvements you would like to hear. Like I said, this audio has come about from your feedback from the podcast. Okay. And then lastly, I'd like you to keep an eye out for an update in our services that's coming later on this week. That's something I'm very excited to be sharing with you. It's just we're tying up some little ends now, and then I'll be releasing that later this week. But for now, enjoy the podcast. The way we usually start this podcast, and I'll get you to do this at the end as well, is similar to Diary of a CEO, where they get a guest, the last guest, to ask a question for the next guest. Except the difference is we give them a heads up on who they're giving it to, and we give a background to it, and instead of it being at the end, we put it at the start. But so everyone listening, that's where I got the inspiration from. Don't judge me. Stealing.
Shout out to Stephen as well. Brilliant podcast.
Yeah, amazing podcast.
I was listening to it on the way here. Yeah, really, really good.
But Ed hasn't listened to our podcast, so he's got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, I do. I was saving it for
you got to listen to Craig's one. Craig's one. You'll like that one. So on our last podcast. And this is going to be funny for the listeners because the listeners haven't heard this podcast before your one comes out. We had Sam Jones on, who's another parkour athlete. You've trained with him before, you probably don't remember. I see him all the time. I did the Welsh 3000s with him, so we had him on to do a review of the Welsh 3000s, except he didn't want to do it. I sort of like made him do it, and then it didn't go well. It wasn't awful, but Sam knows it wasn't great. He's the number one listener as well. Well,
is it
number two after my dad? My dad and my mum, number one listeners.
Shout out to the dad. Shout out.
But Sam's listened to every episode as well, so yeah, he should have known what he was getting himself into. But we're basically scrapping that episode, which is why yours is coming out so quick. And then we're re-recording his episode in a couple of weeks.
Great, but he's still left me a question.
But he's left you a question.
Great, okay.
So his question for you is, what's your next challenge and how are you going to train for it?
Okay, so the next challenge is actually a celebration of the completion of the first challenge, which is why I'm here. Yeah, so the first challenge was England to Singapore. Or England to Australia, although I ran out of money in Singapore. Let's address that later. So the next challenge is going to be John O'Groats to Land's End, so a little bit closer to home, a bit of an English classic, if you will. And yeah, the training that I'm doing for it, I've actually started already. So yesterday I did a 50k, just going from my house to the climbing centre, which is where I see all the community there. I love those guys. But yeah, I'm going to try and make it like a celebration of the completion of the Singapore cycle. So yeah, I'm going to just try and get somebody to come along with have you seen Dom Whitting? No? Oh god, I literally love Dom Whitting stuff. He does drum and bass on the bike.
Okay.
Yeah, which is fascinating, where he gets like a big speaker system and then like loads of people with him. I might have to hit him up.
Yeah.
Imagine.
Do it,
right?
that'll be sick.
Yeah, but basically I'm going to do John O'Groats to Land's End, try and get a load of like friends on it, a load of people that want to join. It's a total open invitation, and it's like a celebratory cycle, to sort of remember the days of the Singapore cycle, which is now, what is that, like 4 years in the past? It's kind of crazy how time flies. Like, it is mad.
Yeah, that was a while back. I remember when you set out on that, and I just was seeing it all over Facebook, and I was like, bro, that is insane that he's doing that.
Yeah. Oh, dude, it was quite the. I remember leaving my parents' house without my house keys, because I just didn't know like when I was even going to be coming back. And my girlfriend at the time, she was a bit stressed at that fact, because I remember saying to her, I was like, I might end up staying in Australia. And she didn't like that,
Yeah. Just leaving your life behind.
Yeah. Well, I didn't intend to, but I am. Maybe more so was. I've kind of got a sort of more solid roots now, but I've never liked to be tied down by things, and I think that as I was 22, when I left for that Australia cycle, I was kind of thinking like, God, life's going to get serious quite soon, and it was almost a bit of a celebration of the last. And I've realised this is a bit mad to think this, but like a celebration of like the last of my youth or something like that. Which I know, right? This is it. I've kind of got on the other side of the Australia trip now, and I'm thinking like, oh, what a silly thought, because you can stay young for as long as you want. There's no set time scale in life, or like somewhere you need to be at any certain time. It's all completely relative and different. Normal is relative, which I understand now. But yeah, at the time I was kind of thinking like, right, finish uni before I get like a job. I'm going to go and do this massive cycle, and I don't think I would do it today if I was, if I didn't do it. Would I have done it? Would I still have done it? Because COVID happened just after, which changed the world. I don't know if I would have done it if I didn't do it when I did it.
Yeah. You just sort of like get tied down and stuck in life, didn't you?
Yeah, you do, which is lovely in its own way. But yeah, if you want to cycle to Australia, much easier when you don't have kids or a mortgage, which I still don't have. But I still don't know if I would do it today. Yeah.
Well, it's something that really inspired me back then, and yeah, similar to you, I used to travel loads, and I was like, I have to do it now. And even though I've got equally as little responsibilities now in it than as I did then, I'm still like, I don't have that same urge and desire to like keep pushing as hard as I was like for the adventure side of things. Like I'm much more like into my training and my health and looking at longevity and everything, not just in my fitness but in life. And it's just like, I don't have that same like, would I do it now? It's like, I don't know if I would. But it's something that I'm definitely thankful that I did.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I think that like maintenance becomes a big thing, like because I do feel like youth is a superpower, and I remember maybe probably less than that, 1 month into the trip, I started having a really quite serious knee issue, and I think it was maybe like conditioning related, like my body was still adjusting to the bike, because that is absolutely something that happens. Another shout out here, lots of shout outs today, to Ross Edgley, because I've listened to his audiobook Resilience, and in that he talks about this adaptation energy, and I think that about that month point I was starting to hit this sort of adaptability threshold where my body was becoming kind of one with the bike, which is it sounds almost a bit horrifying, doesn't it? But yeah, my knee just was really playing up, and I remember sort of sat there with the squad that I was out with, again, massive shout out to them as well. Legends, Jamie, Ryan and Tomaz, those guys were great. And yeah, I remember at that point my knee was just absolutely giving me aggro, and I was just thinking, God, am I even going to be able to go beyond this week? And thankfully, a bit of rest sorted it out, and I think at that point my body was then suitable for the whole thing, because once I'd adapted to the bike, I didn't need to adapt again. That's the thing. So I was able to do the whole thing then with sort of no issues really. I've forgotten how we even got onto this point. How did we get here? Yeah, I don't know. But either way, yeah, adaptation energy, not being able to continue unless you adapt, which is what Ross Edgley experienced when he was adapting to being in the water for so long. So yeah, I've always been inspired by people that take on these massive challenges and their body physically has to adapt or break. Yeah. There's one or the other. Like you can't, there's no middle ground.
That's it. Yeah. It's like you just put yourself in these positions where you either do it or you don't. There's no I'm kind of doing it. It's like, no, your body, like you said, it's either going to do it and overcome that challenge and build from it and be like, right, this is what you're asking of me, that I can deliver that, or get to the point where you're pushing too far and it's like, I can't deliver that, you're just going to be broken.
Yeah.
And it's that process of learning the signals for both, because like you were saying, like your knee was hurting, you was probably leaning more into the I'm going to be broken, but it didn't, clearly. And you just have to push through and get to the point where it's like, no, I am going to adapt and keep going, and just forcing your body into that first camp of, right, we're doing this, there's no other option.
Yeah, for sure. Just to bring up another really, really brilliant point from Ross Edgley's book, that Resilience, which shined a light on this whole thing for me, was his concept of the recovery threshold. So essentially you can break yourself so far and bounce back and get stronger, but if you go beyond that recovery threshold, that's when your body really starts to struggle, and you're actually not recovering. You're getting worse with each training, sort of each training session that you do, which I what's that quote? Fool me once, fool me twice, whatever. I actually made that mistake again with my shoulder. So I had a shoulder injury shortly after finishing the cycle, and then I made the mistake of pushing it past the recovery threshold, and it was recovering, and I started getting really into my training, and then I actually made it significantly worse, which damaged it for a whole 2 years, and it's maybe only just feeling normal again. So it's about learning those signals. What is your body telling you? Can you push past this? Should you push past this?
And I think that's a really important point, especially regarding injuries, is once you've been injured, you always just want to get back to where you was. And it's like, as soon as you feel better and you're like, right, I've been going through my physio or whatever, I've been doing all these exercises and it feels strong now, I'm going to go back and try and do what I was doing before. And that is the fastest way to get injured.
Injured again. Yeah.
It's if you want to make it a recurring issue, just do it until you feel good, and then as soon as you feel good, just blast into it. And where I've worked with a lot of athletes from different sports, I've noticed that a lot, and that just comes from that drive of wanting to be better and knowing where you've been and being like, I want to get back there. Whereas my advice has always been, if you track exactly what you're doing and the loads you're putting on your body throughout the recovery period, and then as soon as you start feeling good, just go a bit beyond what you've been doing and then track how you feel for the next 2 days. So there's a athlete I've been seeing in my gym recently. He really badly hurt his ankle, and I've been giving him little bits of advice. I don't work with him directly, but I've been giving him some advice. And I was like, look, your ankle's been it was bad, it was getting better, and then his physio just told him to just start running on it, and then his first time running on it, he hurt it again. And I was like, you've pushed too far too soon.
Yeah, isn't there quite a well-known phrase, walk before you should run?
So then I said to him, I was like, if you just get I used to train him, and I gave him these little books to track their training in. And I was like, get your book out, write down what you've been doing, and then write down how your ankle feels for the next 48 hours after it. Don't do anything else on it, just log how it feels. And then if it's below like a 5 out of 10 on the pain threshold, then push it a little bit further. But don't overdo it. Like, just literally, like, it could be like an extra 5 minutes on your walking or running or whatever training you're doing. But then if it's anything above a 5, you know to take a step back. But it's really important to do that over 48 hours, because you might wake up the next day and feel fine, and then you train again trying to push it a little bit more, and then that's when you've overdone it, because your body hasn't fully adapted to the stress you've put on it.
So like almost quantifying that recovery threshold.
Yeah,
which Ross talks about. Wow, that's fascinating.
I think that's super important, and it's something that I don't follow when I get injured, because I'm very much driven and I'm like, I want to do this, I'm going to keep pushing, and then I get injured and then I get put back for ages, and then I'll try and push again, and it never ends well. So I need to take my own advice, but it is solid advice. It's worked for everyone I've worked with, like just having that, like you said, quantifying it, having it written in front of you, so you can't argue with it. You can't be like, oh, I think I could have done an extra 10 minutes. It's like, no, you don't think, you write it down.
You know, you can see it. It's there on the paper.
And you can track it and see how it's progressing over time. Because when you get a serious injury, it feels like forever, like when you're in it. I snapped my ankle in half in 2020, and I was non-weight bearing for 6 months. And the next like year,
that was a long 6 months, I bet, wasn't it? Oh my goodness.
But like even after I got out of that, the next year to 2 years was like horrendous, because no matter what I did, I felt like my ankle wasn't getting better. But then when I look back at it, and I realised when I started like walking on it again, like I literally had to learn to walk on it again. And then like a year into it, I might have been running like a 5k or something, and I was still getting pain afterwards, and I was still stiff. But I was like, looking back, like that's progress. But at the time, you don't see that. So if I had it all written out for me, and I was like, oh look, like it could be like I did 5k last week. This week I've done 5.5k. Like that's progress. At the time, you don't feel it, but you can see it, and that helps motivate my athletes as well.
Yeah. You know, you talk about the experience of time passing slower and that kind of thing when you're in an injury, and I can, you know, anyone that's been injured can certainly validate that, I feel, because you're there, you're kind of craving, wanting to get back into training. You know, like probably the longest feeling moment of that Australia trip that I did was when my knee was injured, and I was stretching out minutes of just worrying about, like, am I going to be able to continue? A lot of the time, the time that passes the quickest would perhaps be like a week-long stint going down an empty road, because you're kind of there, you're kind of idle, everything's okay. You know, so Jordan Peterson talks about this sort of concept of psychological time. You know, how much time are you building up in your mind compared to like the, I don't know, fundamental universe's time ticking, and you can only ever add time onto that fundamental time in your mind. You know, gosh, this feels like a bit of a deep hippie sort of topic, doesn't it? But yeah, no, I really sort of swear by that. If you can you know, kind of get yourself out of your mind and into the present. However you do that, I find that that's how you can make time pass easier. And I've certainly got a much stronger relationship with time just through doing long distance cycling. You know, because you're kind of there and you've already cycled for 4 hours and you're thinking, okay, I'm tired now, but I have another 4 hours until I reach my destination. You know, and you're kind of thinking, God, well, how am I going to spend that 4 hours? You know, am I going to spend it in pain? I mean, it's not a great option, really. Or am I just going to spend it acknowledging that pain, knowing that my body has already adapted, and just kind of continuing thinking about, I don't know, whatever I'm thinking about. That's the thing. What am I thinking about when I cycle? I don't know. Certainly not time passing.
That's it. And I think that's something that anyone that does ultras realizes. Any sort of like ultra endurance event is like, no matter what you've just been through, you know there's a hell of a long way in front of you. So if you're just so focused on like the minuscule feelings that your body's got and trying to process everything that you're feeling, emotions and everything, you're probably not going to carry on for much longer, because there are some dark points where you do that and you're like, oh, my knee hurts, my shoulder's hurting, I'm tired, I'm fed up, it could have been raining all day, and you're just like, I've still got 8 hours left to go. And it's like, what is that 8 hours going to bring? But then if you just like keep going, it's probably going to get better.
Yeah, that's it. Like with my knee, it got better. Like, that's the thing. And sometimes you do just need that rest. But if you're halfway through an ultra and you physically can't, then yeah, that's quite difficult. But I think if you relax during your ultra, so say you're halfway through an ultra and your knee's starting to flare up, I feel like if you relax, as long there's maybe a couple of sort of disclaimers here, let's say it's not a particularly bad or recurring knee injury or this kind of thing, so you're halfway into that ultra, your knee's flaring up. If you choose to listen to the pain and relax your knee, as opposed to the opposite mindset, which is stay strong, fight it, be in that moment, I feel like you're more likely to actually develop or exacerbate an injury if you weaken your mindset. But I do feel like that's injury dependent, and I have not studied physio, and I would want to fact check that. But that being said, off the top of my head, I think that it's more important to stay strong, presuming that the injury is not something that's debilitating or recurring or etc.
Yeah, and your body will adapt. I think for things like that you did, because you were cycling for, what was it, like a year? Literally like 365 days. With things like that, it's more important to listen to your body. Whereas if it's just like your first ultra marathon, I remember my first ultra marathon on mile 6, I think it was, out of a 30-mile run, I tore my hip flexor. And I kept getting to the checkpoints being like, oh, I might give up here. And then I was like, I'll just keep pushing, because I knew at the end of it, I could go home and I could relax and rest it for however long I needed. That wasn't a factor in my head. It was like, at some point, this pain is going to not be bothering me anymore, because I've just got to push through today. And it was the same I did. It was funny, 2020, I had COVID on my birthday. And I usually try and do something on my birthday that's like a bit exciting and adventurous. But I was isolating on my own. I lived on my own in a flat. I'd literally just come out of my cast. So I was like, oh, okay, what can I do? And I was like, oh, I had my hangboard. I'm going to do 1,000 pull-ups today. And that was my celebration of my birthday. I was like, I'm going to do 1,000 pull-ups. And I broke it up into sets of 3. So I did 3 pull-ups every minute on the minute for 6 hours. And I'll just get up.
How did you find that?
Oh, it was brutal.
Yeah.
Absolutely brutal. Like when I got to like 200 in, I was like, I'm so done with this.
Wow.
And then that was the point where I was like, I've got 800 more to go. And like the more I did, the worse it got. And I remember got to like 800 and I was struggling to lift my arms above my head. Like I did no training for this. It was just something I just plucked up out of nowhere. And I was like, struggling to lift my arms above my head. But I was like, as soon as this is done, I can just go back to bed. I don't have to be anywhere. I don't have to do anything. Like, no one can come visit me. I can't leave my house.
Yeah.
Like, why does it matter if I'm hurting for the next week? Like, it doesn't. Yeah. So I was just like, I'll just keep pushing. And then for like, it was probably 2 weeks afterwards, I couldn't lift my arms above my head properly. But I was like, I've achieved this thing, and it doesn't matter that I couldn't do that afterwards, because it's going to get better.
Yeah.
So with like things where it's like, there's a time limit to it, it's like, okay, just smash it out, get it done. Yeah, you might get injured, it might hurt, but is that going to bother you in a year's time? Are you going to think back and be like, oh, I'm so glad I gave up so I could use my arms for 2 weeks? Or are you going to look back and be like, I'm so glad I did 1,000 pull-ups in a day and tested like my mental resilience?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like so I talked about injuring my shoulder. I would actually consider my right side to now be my stronger side. Like, that's the thing. Like, your body, you're like, you know, everyone's seen X-Men, or a lot of people have seen X-Men. If you haven't seen X-Men, where have you been? Wolverine, you know, he heals absolutely like super rapidly. If you were to just speed up time, that's what your body's doing. It's just a little bit slower than Wolverine, unfortunately.
Yeah. Not quite to the same extent where if you get stabbed,
true.
then
that's a good point.
like, oof.
Yeah,
but very, very good point. Still,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it's quite incredible what your body is and what it can do, especially when you apply the mental resilience. It actually really breaks my heart when like you go out with someone and they, you say like, oh, should we do this? And they go, oh, I couldn't possibly do that. Like, why can't you possibly do that? At what point is it a mental barrier, and at what point is it actually a genuine physical barrier?
Yeah.
And I do think that we talk about maintenance as well, like maintenance of your body. I do feel like it is like this might sound discouraging, but I don't mean it this way at all. It might be I would say it's easier to maintain your body once it's fit than to get it back to being fit once it's lost. But that being said, it is absolutely possible to get to a fit state no matter where you are in life. Like, it just takes that dedication and commitment and not comparing yourself to people as well. This is another thing that sort of does happen sometimes is people say like, oh, I want to do a cycle, but like, oh, I'm only going from here to here. It's like, well, if that's big for you, that's big for you, and that's absolutely amazing. And like, I think that every win, no matter how small, should be celebrated, especially if it's your first step into fitness. Never be discouraged by looking at like what someone else has achieved. I've always wanted people to get into cycling, and I think that doing something like John O'Groats to Land's End, which is the next challenge that I've got coming up, is a great way for like somebody that's interested in cycle touring but has never done it to experience what like a long cycle tour is.
Yeah.
Because it's probably going to take, I've googled it and it says 14 days. I reckon it's probably going to be closer to about 21.
Oh, really? You think that's how long it's going to take you?
I think so. I
thought you'd be doing it in like a week.
No. So it's approximately 1,000 miles.
Yeah.
And the Australia trip was about 10,000 miles. So that took me a year. A tenth of that is, you're looking at approximately 21 days, just short of a month, if my math is correct. Maybe my math is wrong, I don't know.
I'm sure you could do it quicker than that.
Oh yeah, do you know what the record is?
It's 2 days.
Yeah, 2 days.
It's insane.
That's actually ludicrous. How did somebody do that? That's amazing.
I got into a phase where I was looking up loads of world firsts, and I was like, I want to do a world's first as something stupid. Like, I was really inspired by Ross Edgley's swim, and I was like, I want to find something stupid that I can do. So I was looking it up, and I was like, oh, I wonder what the record is for cycling Land's End John O'Groats. So I was like, oh, that's it. And then I was like, oh, but has anyone ever walked it? And then I was like, yeah, 10 days. I was like, 10 days to walk.
God, even that?
Yeah.
That was fun.
And then I was like, okay, I bet no one's unicycled yet. And I was looking up like unicycling from Land's End to John O'Groats. Do you know what the record is for that?
Oh God, what is it?
A week. Someone's unicycled from Land's End to John O'Groats in a week. I was looking it up being like, no one's going to ever have done that. That's such a stupid thing to do.
Yeah.
And I've never unicycled. I was like, I'll learn and I'll just do it. And then I was like, no, there's no way I can be that. Yeah. So I've given up with firsts, and I'm just like, what's a first for me? That's my new thing. Yeah,
that's it. There is this like obsession, I think, with humans to be the first to do this, the first person with this, first person that. And I think it's a great mentality, it pushes us further as a species, I think. But it is going to get to the point where like, a lot's going to be done, and there's a lot of very, very, very strong and talented people out there doing these things. So I do think this concept of a first, it needs to become more personal, because I think I'm just concerned that people might get disheartened because there's no more firsts to achieve.
Yeah.
Like, there's one that's there's definitely one that's up and coming in the world of long distance cycle touring. I'm pretty sure they're building a bridge. I might have to fact check this one as well. We need the
we need Jamie.
Yeah, that's it, Jamie.
Jamie, pull it up.
Yeah, pull it up, bro. Yeah.
So if anyone wants to come and be the Adventure Athletes Jamie, it's unpaid, but you get to meet really interesting people. Send us a DM.
It's on, yeah, that's it. Someone's got to come be Jamie. So I'm pretty sure they're building a bridge across the. I'm probably going to make a meal of this as well. The Okhotsk. I don't know. It basically connects Alaska to Russia, and I'm pretty sure they're building a bridge across this chain of islands. it's like a certain strait, I can't remember the name of it, but either way, somebody will be the first person to cycle from Cape Town in Africa across land the whole way to Argentina, you know, like the southern point of Argentina, because you can technically do that on land, or will be able to when the bridge is built.
Yeah,
Shout
that'd
out
be
to
insane.
the bridge people. Yeah.
Another shout out to people we don't know.
Yeah, that's it.
Bridge builders, like, get on it. Let's build more bridges.
Let's go, bridge builders. Where are you?
Need to make like a loop around the world, some way that you can start in like Cape Town and get all the way back to Cape Town.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
That'd be insane.
Bridge from Argentina to Cape Town across the Atlantic.
So
Bad
if you're
idea.
a bridge builder,
Yeah.
you got some know-how, let us know if it's possible.
Yeah.
We'll do a fundraiser, GoFundMe.
GoFundMe, yeah. Oh, imagine making like a really serious video about that. Right, we're gonna make a bridge from Argentina to Cape Town, and then like a really serious video. Who would back it?
Elon Musk, maybe.
Oh yes, come on. Okay, but
that'd be
dude, actually,
insane.
speaking of bridges, this brings a bit of a story to my mind actually, because from so one thing I love about cycle touring, you know, long distance cycle touring, is you get to witness the land change and the language change, and you also get to experience you know, sort of the buildings and the architecture change, you know, as well as the environment, and the people. You know, it's a really truly wonderful way to see the world. You know, I'd recommend overland travel to everybody, because when you jump in an aeroplane and you hop out on the other side, you have essentially teleported, and you see nothing in between. You don't really know how or why things are different. They just are different when you step out of that plane. But when you're cycle touring, you see every single bit of the flow of the culture, the flow of the land, and you know, it kind of brings the map of the world closer to your sort of psyche or your soul. And there's a bridge that connects Europe to Asia across the Bosphorus Strait. It's in Istanbul. And I remember sort of cycling up to that bridge, and we were on the European side going to the Asian side. And the European side, you know, it's the European side. It feels quite like Europe. And then we got to the bridge, and the police stop us, and they say, right, you can't cross this bridge. You know, it's a very critical bridge. Like, anything happens with that bridge, you know, connection, business, it's just going to be completely interrupted in Istanbul. So they put us on a bus. We got across, and when we got across, we were just thinking like, oh my god, this is like a completely different feeling place. Like, even just that one separation, where I guess over years and years of these two sides not being connected, versus them suddenly being connected by a bridge. In all of that time before the bridge, I imagine that these places probably were very, very different, you know, because it would have been very difficult to cross that bridge. So these places developed in isolation, and then suddenly this bridge connects them, and it's like, wow, this absolute fusion of cultures. But yeah, there's a very interesting, in fact, there's another book that I want to bring up here, which is called Prisoners of Geography. I'm not sure if you read that book.
No, I haven't.
No, really good book. So it talks about how a lot of these environmental kind of barriers are actually the separations between nationalities, the separations between languages and culture, this kind of thing. Another absolutely fascinating book. So the Bosphorus Strait is an example of that, where both sides have developed independently, and then suddenly they're connected, and it's like, wow, you can really feel the stark difference. I noticed this going over mountain ranges as well. Yeah, it's quite fascinating.
So when you was doing the rest of the trip then, you was going across all these different countries, was it something like where you would see these small changes and maybe not even notice them, where you'd like go across, like cycling through France, Spain? Was there like a gradual change in like how the language was spoken, developing into other languages, and the same with like architecture and the culture? Was there like overlaps, like that sort of submerged these cultures together?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. There's some that are like very, very different, but then there's some that just kind of blend really quite, I don't know, almost like elegantly, like quite beautifully. Like, one thing that we did notice is that churches actually start to look kind of, I don't know if this is going to offend people, I don't know, I'll say it anyway. I thought that churches actually began to start to look slightly more like mosques as they went from like the sort of traditional Gothic, maybe French, I'm going to make a meal of this as well, but let's say French Protestant churches, French Catholic churches that are quite Gothic, and then spreading through to more Protestant churches that are closer to sort of Asia as you get down to Greece and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they actually start to, I would say, look more like mosques. If there's comments on this, somebody drop some hints and facts on that, because that would be really fascinating to know whether there's actually some kind of heritage as to whether, I don't know, there's some sort of truth in that, but it just based on observation, that's what it looked like.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different things like that, especially in the environment, like the ground getting more arid as you start to get closer to the desert and this kind of thing. When you start to get into Central Asia, where the trees start to fade away, and then you're kind of just left with this barren environment that you still have to cycle through. There's only one direction. Speaking of someone traveling in one direction, massive, like, it's another shout out. I hate to say it. That seems to be the word of the podcast.
It's almost like Taylor's still here, because he loves his shout outs. Like, that's all he does on the podcast. He's like, oh, shout out to this person and that person, and I'm like, yeah, okay, Taylor. Yeah, carry on. Is it going to be the hardest geezer?
It's the hardest.
Yeah, I knew that was coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shout out hardest geezer. I'll allow that one. He's an absolute G.
Absolutely.
If you don't know, like, go check him out. But there's also someone else who's doing something very similar to him that not as many people know about. It's basically doing the same thing as him, except they're running from Cape Town to London.
Okay.
I think, again, I could be wrong, I think it's Dio Runs on Instagram. But yeah,
wow.
he's doing an incredible thing.
Yeah. That is really an intense endeavour. That is a mission.
His one is more focused around, he's trying to take it back to the roots of how people migrated out of Africa. That both of them, like Dio Runs is like a lot more fresh into his journey. I think he might be like 2 weeks in or something. Could be wrong, but yeah, the hardest geezer. Like,
do you reckon Dio will catch up with hardest geezer?
No.
Yeah, no. Hardest geezer's made a lot of ground. What's he on now? Day
137 today, I think.
Yeah, so as of this podcast.
Yesterday he crashed the van.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I saw that picture with the smashed window.
He's having like a lot of issues though. So, whereas I know this might sound bad, but I also know that South Africa and Africa still struggle with like racism and separation of cultures. With the hardest geezer being like a very British person.
Ginger.
Yeah, he's white, he's ginger, and he's got this very strong accent. Whereas Dio Runs is black, and he is also, I'm pretty sure he's from South Africa, so he's got that African accent, so maybe he won't run into, like, I know hardest geezer's been having troubles with like people trying to mug him and having to bribe people and loads of stuff. Whereas I don't think Dio Runs is going to have as many issues. So maybe.
You know what? I can agree with you there. Unfortunately, I think there is some truth, a lot of truth behind what you're saying, is that, when you start to really stand out, physically, in the real world, like, then you do attract more attention, whether that be positive, negative, and Africa does, there are parts of Africa that do still struggle with a lot of poverty and this kind of thing, and desperation does lead people to do things that they probably wouldn't do if they weren't desperate, right? And hardest geezer, being a ginger lad from the UK, he stands out way more, so that kind of combination.
It's why tourists get mugged so much, because they very clearly don't fit in with everything around them. They don't fit into the culture because they are tourists. They go in there for a holiday and to look around, and that makes them easy targets because they don't know how it works there. They, like, if you've got the people around the Eiffel Tower, for instance, people around the Eiffel Tower, for an example, where they're going around and they're like getting signatures for fake charities, and you give them donations, and then you look at it and they've literally got like a bit of cardboard with a bit of paper on it. They're like, oh yeah, give us money for this, and then you realise it's a scam. Like, if you're like street smart, but if you don't know any better, then you'll be like, oh, okay, like this is what it's like. I feel really bad. Like, yeah, I'll give them that donation. And I've had my friends have fallen for this, and we've been there like watching them give like 20 quid over, and we're like, what are you doing? Like, they're like, oh, it was for a charity. We're like, you've just been scammed, and like he's had to like chase them.
Jamie, look up this charity. We need to.
It was just, I've seen it so much. And then when I went on holiday with my girlfriend recently, we went to Budapest, and
lovely.
It was literally our first day there. Was trying to find the hotel, and she made it very obvious that we didn't know where we were going. And from like traveling so much myself and putting myself in all these like weird cultures, and like just throwing myself out there, getting mega buses to like the middle of nowhere, like you sort of know how to act on the streets to not be in those situations.
I resonate with you so much right now. Yeah, absolutely. I sometimes feel that like the more lost or the more out of place you look, the more attention that you attract as well. And again, you know, when we multiply that attention by, you know, desperation, poverty, this kind of thing, then that can, I think, lead to quite difficult circumstances. Obviously, as well, it's, you know, again, there's like a lot of disclaimers, you know, because it, and these are, again, unfortunate possible truths, you know, to the matter. You know, if you look at the statistics of like between men and women as well, you know, statistically, you're safer on, you know, streets being a man, etc. But anyway, all of that aside, absolutely, you know, the more that you resonate confidence when you're out in an uncomfortable situation, I think that the more under the radar, let's say, you know, I think there's better terminology to describe this, but let's say the more under the radar you kind of go, because people don't see you as somebody that can be taken advantage of. You know,
and I think I saw that in Budapest very clearly, because where I was with my girlfriend and she was making it very obvious that we were like a little bit lost trying to find our way, and I was just sort of like walking. I noticed that someone started following us and was like essentially looking to mug us, and I was like I'd make some obvious moves, like, you know, where you just dip down a side street. She was like, why are we going down here? And I was like, oh, I'm just seeing if someone's following us. And then they did, and I'd go down another way, and I ended up doing a circle, and they were still following us. So if you've done a circle, it's very obvious they're following you. And then I was like, yeah, we're being followed. She was like, how do you know that? And then I was like, because I'm very aware of what's around me, and you're looking around like, what's that? Oh, what's going on? And I'm just a bit like, oh, like, can we just like tone it down? Maybe like put your phone away, make sure it's somewhere safe, make sure you're holding onto your bag, and like
just in case. For sure.
And like we got to the hotel, like it was all fine in the end. I think the guy realised that I knew he was following us, and like we got to the hotel and it was fine. But like I think that was a bit of a wake up call for her, being like, oh, maybe we should be a bit careful when we're travelling. And I'm like, like the world's not full of nice people, unfortunately.
No, unfortunately not.
People will take advantage of you if they can, but I think that's come from like years of people trying to steal from me from travelling and stuff like that. I've had so many stories.
Will, sorry, you've just given me such a really interesting brainwave here. You just said people will take people will take advantage of you if they can. I actually think that maybe that phrase should be reversed. People can take advantage of you if they will. Because I'm a strong believer of so many people out there that are just families, you know, and I'm sure you are too, like, that just want to get by. You know, that's why I think that phrase is great flipped, because I don't think there's many people, unless I'm being particularly optimistic, which I have had people say that. I am quite optimistic.
You are, definitely.
Very much so. You know, I wouldn't have it any other way, but yeah, I do think that not everybody is out there to get you. It is a small minority, and it is an unfortunate minority that make all of that sort of noise in that space, you know, people getting mugged. Like, the average person isn't going to mug you, I don't think, you know, even in a desperate circumstance. But like, if you happen to come across one of those people that will, then
you have to be ready for it. That's the thing. Like you're saying, there's a small percentage of people that will, but you need to be ready to deal with those people.
Happen. Yeah, for sure.
It could be the same in any circumstance. Like, there's a minority of people that will try and like take advantage of you financially in the business world, but you have to be aware of the tricks that they play in order to not get fooled by it. It's the same in any industry. Like, there are people out there that will unfortunately do bad things, and like you're saying, it's a minority. But just because it's a minority doesn't mean you should sort of like go through the world blissfully, like expecting the best from people. I always stick to that whole thing of like, hope for the best but expect the worst.
If I can sort of explain how I tackled this on the Australia trip, because I was in, you know, especially when because the crew, so I went out with a team of 4. You know, it was me, Thomas, Ryan and Jamie, the 4 of us, the sort of 4 musketeers. Or is it 3 musketeers?
3 musketeers, but we'll make it 4 for this.
We'll make it 4, yeah, sure. So so we went out, you know, the 4 of us, and then as I was going further and further, they were kind of dropping off. You know, Thomas was the first to leave, unfortunately, and you know, he just had other commitments, other things. So did Ryan. Ryan left in Istanbul, and then Jamie, who stayed with me all the way up until Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. You know, sort of going down to Delhi, that kind of thing. Jamie left there, and then suddenly I was alone in India, sort of like, oh my goodness, like there's this absolute world of chaos going on around me that I've never really been in before properly, and you know, it was very intimidating. Like, I was overwhelmed, totally overwhelmed, and I was kind of thinking, like, how am I going to deal with this overwhelm, this sort of fear of things being taken from me? And you know, when I say things, I kind of mean personal possessions, and I'm not sort of talking about sort of life here. I don't think anyone's going to threaten life, at least I certainly hope not. But the way that I dealt with this is, my mentality from India going forwards was, if I get robbed and everything gets taken from me, that's okay, that's fine. Like, that was my mentality. Like, I still will protect my things, but if it all gets stolen, including my passport, I still have my life. And I've kind of kept that mentality today. And I oftentimes will think, like, oh, do your worst, like, because, you know, unless you take my life, you know, I still have my life. That's the most precious thing that I own. And so I'm not very materialistic, you know. I like my skateboard. I like my slackline and things I can go and have fun with, but I just can't. I don't know. I think that the more that you have, which just adds this kind of, I don't know, this is my personality here, but the more that you have that adds kind of pointless value, I guess. Like, it kind of is more to be taken away, and the more that you have to fear being taken away. Whereas if you strip back everything, you know, the one thing you have that's really important is your life. The Stoics have a good mentality about that. Do you know much about the Stoics? I know Stoicism.
So the Stoics are just like the people that sort of follow that, the philosophy of Stoicism. There's a very like good idea that I've read about that's very Stoic, whereas you don't ever really own anything. Like, it will come into your life and it will leave your life when it's sort of time to be in your life. So you don't own the possessions. They just sort of, they're with you. They spend time with you, and when it's no longer like your time with them, then they're gone. And it's something that I've had to deal with recently. I've got a motorbike outside. I don't know if you saw it. 2 weeks ago, that motorbike, I went outside to go to work and it was gone, and I was like, where's my bike? And I was like really panicked, and I was like, ran out and I was like looking around. I was like, where's my motorbike gone? Like, I've spent, like, my dad will tell you this, we've spent so many hours working on that bike. It's had so many issues, and we'd just got it running, and it had been running for like maybe 2 to 4 weeks. And then it was gone, and I was like, what?
Oh,
Where's
no.
my bike gone? And someone had tried stealing my bike.
Yeah.
And at first, like, obviously you've got that panic of, like, someone's stolen it. But then, like, after I'd reported it to the police, insurance, everything, and gone through all that hassle, I was like, oh, well, it's just a thing. Like, still got a car outside. Fortunate enough to have 2 vehicles. So I was like, I've still got my car, I've still got, like, all my health, like, nothing's been damaged, I just don't have a bike anymore. And I was, like, resigned to the fact that I didn't have a bike anymore, and it was like, that's it. Like, it's a thing, and that thing's gone, I can always get another thing. But then what's been frustrating me with the whole situation is, so it got recovered. This all happened literally like yesterday, by the way.
Oh, wow.
So it had been recovered, and I found out it had been recovered the day I reported it as stolen, but I only found out like two days ago.
God.
So then, like, I went up, I picked it up from being recovered. They said they didn't see any, like, obvious damage to it. I picked it up and I was like, oh, I've got my bike back. And then, like, I had to pay to get it released. So I've forked out a load of money to get it back. And I was like, oh, at least I've got it back. And I put my girlfriend on my insurance to go and drive my car, so then I can ride my bike home and everything. Took all my bike gear. And when I got it out of the recovery compound, they'd cut all the wires because they were trying to hotwire it. And they'd failed hotwiring it, so they just ditched it, which is when it had then been picked up. And then I tried getting it recovered through my recovery company, and then they couldn't recover it because where I'd reported it as stolen to my insurance, I transferred ownership to the insurance. It'd been recovered, so they transferred it back to me, so the tax was no longer applicable because the tax doesn't transfer over. So they wouldn't pick it up because it's not taxed. But I couldn't tax it because I didn't have the new logbook, which takes 2 weeks to come back. So I've just been going around this faff of like, oh, I don't know what to do, and like the hassle it caused me, and like knowing how much time and effort was going into this thing, that's what was causing me the distress, not the fact that my bike was stolen. It was the fact that I value my time more than money. And I was like, this is eating up a lot of my time and energy that I could be putting into something more beneficial for me. And that was so frustrating. And in the end, like, shout out to my parents, they drove from London, they borrowed their neighbour's van to come drive to Wales last night, picked my bike up from outside the recovery company and drove it back to my house. So now I've got my bike back.
Wow. God, what an ordeal though.
I know, it's been an absolute faff.
Absolute faff.
And this is what I'm saying, like, I was getting so frustrated because it was taking up so much time and energy, and I'm constantly on the phone, and I'm like, I've got better things in my life to be doing than chasing around for this thing. And a lot of that time is just sort of bureaucracy. Just like, oh, the logbook is this, and it's not been taxed. It's like all these like weird little bits and pieces that, and it's just like, like, I know I said we don't own things, but like legally I owned that thing, so it's like, why can't you pick it up for me? I've paid my insurance, I paid recovery,
but technically, oh god,
and it's like
nightmare.
Legally I own it, so like, why can't you do it? And you're like, no, we can't do that, and it's just like, just
jumping through hoops. So thinking about, so you know what I said a second ago, so someone pointed this out to me, and it was a real reality check as well. I just want to bring this up because I think it's really fascinating, is sort of privilege, the P word, privilege.
The P word.
The P word, yes, the privilege
it's
word.
It's going to be a swear word soon.
For sure. So, so seriously though, so I think it's very easy to not worry about your things being taken away from a perspective of privilege. And someone pointed this out to me, and I was kind of thinking, oh yeah, actually you're very right. Because, as you said a second ago, shout out parents. I've got to shout out the parents as well. Like, I still live at home. There's perspective on this whole thing, and I do wonder if, like, if it wasn't for that safety net, would I have been in a much more anxious state whilst I was out there? And I don't know the answer to that question because I'm not living that life. But I have had a middle class upbringing for sure. Like, I can't like ignore that. It's who I am. And if I was to get robbed, if I got robbed and I lost everything, I would have ended up coming home, sorry boy, to my parents. you know, and then they would have helped me out, and we would have figured it out. But lots of people don't have that privilege.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
You know, I just can't answer that question of would I have been as relaxed and as comfortable, and perhaps even today, would I be as relaxed and comfortable as I would be losing something if I knew that I couldn't get it back. So it's kind of funny, these material things that we have, they do add a dynamic to your life. You know, if I had my car stolen, that would seriously affect my life.
Yeah,
I probably wouldn't be here. You know, because how would I get here? What, cycle? I mean, I would.
I mean, you could.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would. But it would be significantly more effort.
Yeah.
You know, significantly more. So, yeah, I think essentially it's kind of like in your mind, if you can. So putting privilege aside, it's like in your mind, if you can detach yourself from the necessity of these material things, you know, the fear of losing them, if you can detach yourself at least from that, no matter where you are on the privilege perspective, you know, the privilege scale, then I think it actually will unlock a lot of confidence. You know? And sometimes that confidence, as we've mentioned before, can protect you. I think it's, you know, almost like a force field.
Yeah. I think it's something that I was very, very good at doing, because like you said, I had that safety net of my parents, and I wasn't middle class. Like, as much as my well, I know my mum definitely hates me saying it, but like we were lower class, like 100% lower class. We, like, it wasn't easy, but like it wasn't as hard as a lot of people have it. We had everything we wanted. We had a roof over our head, we had food, we had water, we like had whatever we wanted, really. Like, we didn't ask for much, but you know, you get by. So I know I've always had my parents there, but I've put myself in situations where I haven't relied on them when I'm struggling, and just to know that I can get by.
That's so healthy to do, I think.
For me, like, that was really shown that that's my mentality, was when it was lockdown and I was homeless and I was sleeping on a park bench, and I was still working at the fire station. So then that's why I was sleeping in the park, so I could get to the fire station in case any calls came in. And then it was like, I knew if I wanted to, I could have turned around and been like, gone to my parents, can I come and live with you while until I figure something out? And I could have explained to the fire service what had happened, and they would have been fine with it. But I had like this thing in my head of, I want to get through this. I want to know I can get through this. And I put myself out there to just force myself to do what I felt was the right thing. Like, it was in a pandemic. I was a crucial worker, being a firefighter. There was loads of fires around here, and I trained my arse off to get into that position. And I was like, I want to use my training in the time when it's needed. I don't want to have to rely on other people, no matter what's happening to me. So you just sort of put your own emotions aside. And yeah, I was sleeping on a park bench. I had my motorbike parked at the fire station. I didn't have any other things. At first, I didn't even have a sleeping bag. It was only when my manager found out that he was like, I'm going to bring you a sleeping bag and a pillow and you can sleep on the station, which was just a few chairs pulled together. And like, even then it was like, that was a massive help for me, but I was like, I want to get through this on my own. I don't want to rely on other people.
If you'd have spoken to your parents in that moment, you know, yes, you would have received comfort and love, etc., but like, would you have received would you have gained resilience for yourself? Would you?
They knew what was going on, which I think they struggled with, knowing that I was homeless and struggling, and that I had the choice to go home and I didn't take it. But they also know what I'm like and understand why I was doing it.
What you were doing,
and it was the fact that I really truly believed that what I was doing was the right thing. Whereas I don't think a lot of people would have made that choice.
I feel like it's those choices that, you know, who can track back why we make these choices, you know. I don't know. But I think that those choices are what make us who we are. You know? Like, what would you do when it comes to crunch time? You know, what choice do you make? Do you make a comfortable choice?
You can't answer without being put in it. You can say you would do these things. Like, I've always told myself, if this happens, this is how I would respond. And I've always thought like that, but then until it happens, you don't know how you're going to respond, because you don't control your response, really. You can control how you react to your response and what you do in that situation, but like, emotions are always going to come up. It's just how you deal with them. So I think it's like, this is what I think is so important, to put yourself in hard situations, like cycling to Australia, like doing ultras, doing anything that's physically and mentally challenging. I think is super important, so you know how you react and can train how to react in hard situations.
Definitely. I've always had this I think it's really important to not kind of ignore your roots and where you came from, whether it's lower class, upper class, middle class, whatever. I don't think anybody should be ashamed of their position, no matter what. You're alive and breathing. That's a miracle as it is. But I've always had this kind of sort of perspective. I've always known that there are people out there that are struggling or in a much worse situation. Like I did the Australia trip for charity, and I did it for a homelessness charity, because through doing parkour, we've both done the street sport parkour for an awfully long time, and through parkour you end up in some of the slightly less developed areas of cities and towns, because that's where there's a lot of that brutalist architecture, that kind of thing, that's really great. It's a habitat for parkour. It's brilliant. But in those places you'll often meet these different characters, some of them that are maybe homeless, and I would always have these interactions with homeless people, particularly in Bournemouth. I think there is quite a hub of homeless people there. There's quite a large homeless population. Possibly because of the climate, other factors. Jamie put it up, only the fact check for sure. But either way, in my anecdotal experience, I met a lot of homeless people in Bournemouth, and for the most part, they were absolutely lovely. People in that community, they do struggle with addiction. Things in their life haven't necessarily gone their way. I've spoke to so many people. It's just some people that come to mind. One man, he was running a business. His business didn't work out. His wife, he didn't want to continue the relationship. He ended up losing the house, and next thing you know, he's on the street. Like, your life can change in an instant. It's that crazy, like,
especially the way the world's going now, like post COVID and everything. Like, that's just demonstrated how much of a drastic change can happen so quickly.
Oh my goodness, right? But like, it just through meeting, and I've had hundreds of these interactions, right? Hundreds of people. There's so many people that are on the streets, and I just thought, like, these people don't need a house per se. What they need is facilitation into sort of getting back into, like, reintegration into society. You put a homeless person in a house, like you just put them straight there. You give them everything they need. Well, that person doesn't have the mindset perhaps to continue living that way, so it's actually like listening and understanding. And that's why I found this amazing charity. Here's a really good shout out, I really mean this one, Trinity Homeless Projects, right? So it's the charity that I did the cycle trip for, and they work on that front. They actually sit down with people and they say, look, like, let's understand the situation and then find a way to reintegrate into society, and that kind of build up that mindset. A lot of people that are homeless, they think that they deserve it. Like, that's so sad. Like, that's terrible. And so I think that it's that kind of coaching, and Trinity Homeless Projects, I've got a massive respect for the people at that charity. And I think all in all, I didn't quite reach my target for the Australia trip. I think I raised something like £4,500.
Oh, wow.
I don't know how that translates to sort of direct effect per se, but I'm just happy I could raise something, especially to a charity that actually addresses the root of the issue and doesn't just exactly. So homelessness, despite my sort of, like I say, my middle class background, homelessness has always been a big thing for me, because I just don't want anybody to have to be alone in those instances. People deserve to be able to have a shelter, and they deserve more than being on the street.
Again, Fact checked. We need Jamie here. Something that I've read about and heard about online is this idea that if you've got food, if you've got clean water in your house, if you've got a shelter, some form of like roof over your head, if you've got all of those three things, then you're in the top 1% of the overall population of the world. And that is an insane figure to think about. Thinking about, like, we're talking about privilege, and like I was saying, like, yeah, we were lower class. If we're lower class and still in the top 1% of the world, that's always blown my mind on like how much of abundance we have, even in like the lowest of classes in society, that when you get to like even lower than that, almost like the subdivisions, and like how little they have and how little opportunity they have to get out of it, is just mind-blowing. And we don't really see that in the first world. We see homelessness, and we always assume the worst, like they're drug addicts and like they've had all these horrible things happen to them. And like you said, it could be like someone's wife's left them, and
you don't know their background. You have no idea. You know, nobody knows until you speak to them. But then you get on that level and you break down the stigma and you sit down with them and you say, "What's going on?"
Yeah,
it's a person, like.
But then there's the rest of the world that we don't see that are in that those situations. Like the hardest geezer posted a picture of a 10-year-old holding like a big rat or something, and he was saying about how he's met this 10-year-old that goes out, kills all these animals and sells them to look after his family, just so that like they can eat and like get some water, and like they don't have a proper home or anything. And it's like that's normal for that culture, and it's like how is that like a normal part of the human experience, like in our day and age?
For real. Like
we think of that of like hunting and gathering as like thousands of years ago, but there's still people out there doing it today. And like it's different for like tribes people and stuff, where that's like that is just their culture, and like they're not struggling, they're not doing it as the form of struggle, that is their life, and they're like content in that, because you'll see all these clips from different tribes. But then we're talking about people that are actually like in mainland societies that are having to do that, and that just blows my mind.
Mind-blowing. I remember when I was cycling along the Afghanistan border, between Tajikistan and Afghanistan, I met this young boy. He was, I don't know, probably like 13, 14. His face completely black with coal. He was carrying a pickaxe, you know, all the way from somewhere to somewhere. Didn't ask him that, you know, but we did stop, and we sort of said to him like, "Oh, you know, what are you doing?" And he actually spoke quite good English, and he was explaining to us, you know, he goes out and he works in the mines, and he earns money for his family, and one day he wants to use his English. He was learning English so that he could do better in business, because, you know, again, circumstance has it that English is the language of business, or considered the language of business. And he was saying he wants to move his family into the city, Dushanbe, you know, the capital of Tajikistan, and he wants to get them out of that situation. And the only way he sees fit is to work 12 hours a day in a mine, and he's 13. That's a reality that's happening today, this very day. So you know, it's outrageous. Comparison perspective, it is outrageous.
I think this is why traveling's so important, because without travelling, and like I mean actual travelling, not tourism, not going to see the Eiffel Tower or the Leaning Tower of Pisa, like going out like you did, cycling across the world, or going and like I went to Cambodia and I was doing charity work in Cambodia, in schools and stuff. And getting down into the actual cultures and society in that area and learning about the issues they've got, then you really don't understand how privileged you are. Like majority of people have never had to see things like that. They'll hear about it on TV and on the internet, but until you see it in person, like you're saying, like seeing a 13-year-old with a pickaxe thinking that's the only way he can provide for his family, that is like, it takes you to another level emotionally. I feel.
Yeah, for sure. You know, Will, you've got me thinking, like, perhaps the best way to you know, as a society to address a problem is, especially one that is kind of cross borders, like you say, is to go and travel, and not just travel, I mean like actually see and understand and speak to the people that are going through the problems in these other countries. And that, you know, only from that perspective, when you understand your position in the whole thing, whether it's favorable or unfavorable, no matter which side, you know, when you understand your position, that's when you can actually do something and make a change, because you have the information, you know where you stand, and you can actually look at someone's situation and go, oh my gosh, they're really struggling. Or, you know, because perhaps you don't know how much they are struggling if you haven't actually gotten onto their level and spoken to them. And I just wish that people don't build up a stigma, and actually don't be afraid to speak to people that might be in a more difficult situation, you know, and don't look down. Get on their level and just say, what's going on? Human to human. Doesn't have to have any kind of pretense.
I think it's the only way that change ever happens, especially with charity work, from experience, because the only time you're going to do charity work, like you're saying, is like, oh, I was doing this for homelessness, because you've met and spoke with hundreds of homeless people in your area. And that's the only way you truly understand the issues they're going through, and that's the only reason why you care. Like, I know that sounds harsh, but you're only caring about it because you've had some form of experience with it. And that brings me to, like, when I've done things, I went homeless for a week for charity, like back in the day, to raise money for homelessness. But the only reason why I saw that as a fit way to do it was because I'd experienced homelessness. Now a lot of my fundraising goes towards mental health and men's mental health, because that's something I struggle with and have experienced. So that's what I'm passionate about. And with Taylor, rest in peace, he's not dead, he's just not here.
He's not present.
Not present.
I did call him on the way here though, looking for a parking space, which I still didn't find.
So with Taylor, he had done all his charity events for like mental health and other things before. He's now seeing someone who's got this disorder, FND. I don't know for the life of me what it stands for. Taylor will tell you all about it.
We need Jamie, don't we?
We do need Jamie. Really But Taylor's now doing fundraising for an FND charity, because it's something that he's now experienced. And even he was saying in one of his posts online that he had no idea that this was even a thing until he experienced it. So until you know about an issue and you go and experience it, you're just not going to like care enough to change it.
Yeah, and not all experiences will happen to you.
Yeah,
you have to seek them out,
100%,
and in a productive way.
Yeah,
you know, and normally that means breaking down the stigma and actually getting in there and experiencing it. Yeah, you know, when I set off on that travel initially, I knew it wasn't going to be easy, and I was going to rely on people and get on their level. You know, when I was in India, you know, kind of, I actually, here we go. Shout out to the man in India. One more shout out. You know, there was a lovely man in India. I never got his name. He didn't speak English, but he had made a bamboo bridge. He'd made it. His family had made it. Yeah, he was living on a. There was no roof. You know, it's like kind of like a fort on, like a mound of land surrounded by water. Like actually surrounded, it's kind of like a moat, you know, it's kind of what the terrain was like. And he built this bamboo bridge that was connecting, you know, his house to the road. And I stopped my bike and I thought, God, this is amazing. Like I was inspired by this man's bridge that he, you know, him and his family had made. And so I stopped my bike and I was just kind of like in awe looking at it, thinking like, God, you know, imagine that in the UK. Like who's building bamboo bridges in the UK, you know? So he comes out, and of course, because I was experiencing the hardest geezer effect, you know, the only white man in a country, you know, where that wasn't what people look like, I was attracting a lot of attention, and very rapidly as well. And so the man comes out, his whole family comes out, and I'd actually this is kind of crazy. I'd thrown away my bike lock at this point. I didn't have a bike lock, like, because I don't know, maybe I was so encompassed in that feeling of, if everything gets stolen, I've still got my life. That's how deeply I was feeling that. And so he came out and you know, he didn't speak any English, and I said, hey, I love your bridge. I sort of mimicked, you know, your bridge, this is cool, this bridge, you know, you've built this thing, like, wow. And I was kind of saying, like, can I, you know, sort of mimicking with my hands, can I cross it? I would love, I'd be honoured to cross your bridge. And so he was like, yes. He mimicked yes, you know. And I crossed the bridge, and I remember thinking, I was halfway across the bridge, and I kind of was so caught up in the moment that I'd left my bike behind. And I looked back, and I kind of looked at him, and he was there with maybe 8 other people. And I was thinking, like, oh my God, my bike. And I said to him, I sort of pointed, I said in a bit of anxiety, you know, sort of, is my bike okay there? Not locked up on the road? And he was saying, yeah, that's fine. I was kind of like, okay, I'll keep going. So I crossed the bridge, and then his family joined me, and they made me a tea in the house. And I've got this sense of, like, they were quite honoured to have me there, you know. And I shared this tea with him. I couldn't speak with him, but it was just nice to sort of be in his company. And I thought, like, if I had been in a state of fear and not embracing what I was experiencing in that moment, maybe I wouldn't have stopped and crossed this man's bridge and had a meaningful experience. You know, I didn't speak with his family. I don't know, I guess being there with his family, it was meaningful, and it was human. And like, you can't get on that level unless you break down what it is you're scared of, you know. I was scared of my bike being stolen, but this guy and his family, they had one of the boys stay outside with the bike.
Oh my God. Fair play.
I know. I was blown away by some of the kindness that I experienced in the world. I was absolutely blown away. Not everyone is there to get you, you know? And a lot of people want the best for you, and they just want to have a meaningful time, right?
Yeah.
And we did. God knows where that guy is. I would love, you know what, there's a couple of people, I wish it was just easier to get to these people and like find them again and just say thank you, you know.
I always think that, thinking back to my travels, is there's so many people that I've met along the way and had such meaningful experiences with that you just never know what happens to them.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is.
Yeah.
And you just think back every now and then and you think, like, that was so, like, it might mean more to you later on than it did at the time. And you're just so thankful for that person, and you wish you could do something for them. Maybe like you was in a bad place and now you're in a better place, and you're like, I want to help them, but you can't. And that really sums up, again, another Stoic thing that I like thinking about, of why do people do good things? And it comes down to, they're putting it in a way of, what do you want out of doing a good thing? Because most people want something in return. If I've done you a favour, you now owe me a favour. So when I'm in need, you have to be there for me. And that's not how we should see it. It should be, you do a good thing, but one, because it's the right thing to do. And then the benefits of that is the person that you've done it for gets a good thing happen to them. That is a reward in itself. They get a benefit from it, and then you get the feeling of doing a good thing. So you've got 2 things in that exchange. Why are you then looking for a third? And that's something I think about a lot when I do good things for people, or I have the opportunity to do a good thing for someone. Am I already thinking, what can they do for me?
What am I getting out of this?
Or am I thinking, is this the right thing to do? And sometimes I catch myself out, and I think this is what I really like about Stoicism, is it's just that honest reflection of yourself in an unjudgmental way. I will reflect and be like, when I've had the opportunity to do this good thing, I was thinking, what's it going to benefit me for? And I will sit down and reflect on that. It could be on my drive home, it could be when I'm journaling, it could be whenever throughout the day, but I'll reflect on that and be like, I don't like that I did that. Next time it happens, I'm going to try and be more positive and think, is this the right thing to do? Instead of thinking, what do I get from doing it? That's what I like to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, coming to the end of the podcast now, there's one question I really love asking everyone, because everyone that comes on has got something to share with others. So my question for you is, thinking about your experience cycling across the world essentially, and everything else that you've done, because you've had a very interesting life. I've been like friends with you for many years now. Obviously I keep up with you on social media. We don't always talk, but that's how the world is. That's the beauty of social media, as many bad things there are. But thinking about your life and your experiences, what would be one piece of advice that you give the listeners?
Don't be afraid of boredom, I think. Yeah, you know, because like I said, when you're 4 hours into, you know, something and you have 4 hours more, what are you going to do for that second 4 hours? You know, you're there, you're thinking, oh my gosh. And a lot of people will reach to social media and scroll. You know, there's this new term, doom scrolling, you know. So I feel like when you are not letting yourself be bored, you know, let yourself be bored. What are you thinking in that moment when you're not stimulated? What are you thinking about? You know, perhaps that's something that you need to address, you know. And so when you go on long form travel and you're sat thinking, oh my god, I don't have any signal, I'm here as a human, you know, we put so many layers on society. What is it that comes to your mind when you get bored? And let yourself be bored, and try, and like you said earlier, you said something really beautiful. I will reflect, you know, like reflect, yeah, and let yourself get to a state where you can.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think a lot of people are scared to be with their own thoughts because they don't understand themselves the way that they want to. Maybe they're scared of what will come up in their thoughts. Maybe they've been hiding from things. But unless you know the things you're trying to get away from, then you're not going to know to do anything about it. Yeah.
There's a lot of avoidance that you can do with social media, you know, and scrolling. And I don't know. I guess it's like a modern condition, isn't it? And maybe it's just let yourself be bored. Yeah. I don't know if, I think that's probably what I would say. Yeah.
I think that's amazing advice. Well, thank you for coming on.
It's been a pleasure.
Where can people find you online?
Okay, so my YouTube channel is Hack Is Out There, all one word. And
great YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, thanks man. I'm trying to get more content up on there, but you know, it's one of those things, trying to balance life and everything, because I feel like everyone's got a lot of love to give. Oh, last thing actually, whilst we're thinking about this, I've heard someone say something recently, and I think it stands to some truth. Try to create more than you consume. And apparently that's a bit of like a life hack to happiness. I don't know. Oh god, we can't even get Jamie to fact check that one. Yeah. I don't know, but anyway, I love creating, you know, and so everything that I've put up you know, is kind of there. So yeah, Hack Is Out There on YouTube, Hack Is Out There on Instagram. You can watch the whole Australia trip movie. It's there, you know, and
I highly recommend it. Like, you can put on a film and just be distracted by the film, and you don't get anything at the end of the film, but you could put on this, it's essentially a documentary that Ed's made about his trip, and you'll have a great time and you will learn something from it and you'll be inspired. I love coming back to watch it. Yeah,
you know what? I've had so many people say that they've watched it multiple times.
Yeah,
which is amazing, you know, because I think I was able to really, you know, all of what we've talked about here. I think that's the subtext of the film, which is really cool. And there's so much more you can get from that film than you can get from this podcast, I feel, because there's so much more experience in that. And you might not go as in depth with that, but the undertones are there, like you were saying.
Yeah. Like, I think this was like a deeper dive into a couple of topics, whereas like we could have talked for hours. I feel like this could have been
I could sit here possibly all day. I think. Yeah, it might have been the longest podcast ever made, and it would have been great. Yeah,
it would have been. I would have loved every minute of it.
Yeah, for real.
So we'll definitely have to get you back on. But yeah, watching that film, like that documentary you put out, and just every time I watch it, I get inspired. I think there's so much
Thank you.
value in content like that. So I'll definitely link it in all of our socials. So
Yeah.
go check it out.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. And also, best of luck with Adventure Athletes. I think this is a
Thank
great podcast. Yeah, I can't wait to see who else comes on. I'm certainly going to be listening to it from now on. I'm
Yeah.
going to catch up on some episodes too.
We've got some good guests lined up, I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So
Do you want to give a hint as to who's coming next week, or is that?
oh no, you'll have to find that out.
Oh, have to find out soon.
Right, well, thank you, Ed, for coming on, and thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Adventure Athletes podcast. If you want to follow us online, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at The Adventure Athletes. You can also find us on YouTube at The Adventure Athletes as well. If you click on the link in our bio on either account, you can go straight to our link tree where you can follow us on Spotify, where you can listen to the Adventure Athlete podcast for free, where we have loads of amazing guests on across the fitness and adventure industry and the much wider world as well. You can also follow the link in that link tree as well to our free adventure athlete program, which is called Average to Athlete 1.01 currently, but we'll be always updating throughout the future as we go. So if you do want to try a free program, we've got a bodyweight version and a gym-based version. Go follow us there and find out.